What's going on, folks? French here, and today I wanted to talk about vitamin D. So, what is it? What are the benefits? Why a lot of people aren't getting enough of it, and how you can get enough of it. So, I'm just going to jump right in here. So, I think we all know, most people know that vitamins and minerals are generally healthy for us, and that we need to be getting enough of them through our diet, fruits and vegetables, stuff like that. But that's usually about as deep as it goes, pretty surface level. A lot of people don't question, am I deficient in this vitamin or this mineral? And we don't really think of, are some of my health and fitness struggles due to maybe a vitamin deficiency or something like that? So the reason why vitamin D is so prevalent is because a ton of people are not getting enough of it. And it's an essential vitamin, so it's super important. And it's actually estimated that about half the world's population is not getting enough vitamin D for optimal health. So half the world's population is not getting enough. That's crazy. Some of the deficiency symptoms can include, getting sick, having a compromised immune system, impaired wound healing, lack of bone density, weak bones, and it's even been linked to anxiety and depression, so more on that later. So let's get into some of the benefits that vitamin D provides us and how it can help improve or eradicate some of these things. So bone health, as I mentioned. Now, when I was a kid, they told us that things like milk made strong bones, because all this stuff with calcium in it, which has some truth to it, but although it is somewhat true, calcium alone isn't actually enough to build strong bones. So vitamin D actually helps facilitate calcium reabsorption within the body, as well as like magnesium, and I believe it's phosphate that helps build strong bones. So that's kind of the reason why there's not just one essential micronutrient. There's a lot of essential vitamins and minerals because they each kind of have a different function in the body, and a lot of times they kind of work as a team. Vitamin D, calcium, they kind of work as a team to help build strong bones. So good stuff there. Immune health. So this is a big one. Now, I think a lot of the reason why people tend to get sick in at the beginning of winter, especially here in Iowa where I live, we have this thing, we call it the flu season. A lot of people end up getting sick around maybe December, maybe even November, depending on how cold it gets, how quickly it gets cold. And a lot of this is due to compromised immune systems, and a lot of that can come from vitamin D because it's often overcast, there's not enough sunlight to get adequate levels of vitamin D from UVB rays, and that can lead to a compromised immune system. And actually some other autoimmune systems like type 1 diabetes even are at a larger risk with low vitamin D. And geography, as you're going to see in this video, plays a huge part in how much vitamin D you can even possibly get year-round and why a lot of people lack it. So according to an article published by the Harvard School of Public Health, a child in Finland is about 400 times more likely to develop type diabetes than a child in Venezuela. Now, obviously, we can't put blame solely on lack of vitamin D. Genetics is always going to play the biggest variable, and, socioeconomic status and all that good stuff. But I think if you equated for all that, I think you're still a lot more likely to develop some of these autoimmune diseases if you lack vitamin D than if you were getting enough vitamin D. I mean, that's just common sense. The less, adequate you are in any vitamin or mineral, your health is probably going to be compromised in some way. And to me, it just kind of makes sense. Like Finland, it's in Northern Europe. It's often overcast and cloudy, especially during the winter months. It gets cold. Whereas a country like Venezuela in northern South America, really close to the equator, it's hot all year round. You got no problem getting enough sunlight. So there's even been some studies that have kind of linked vitamin D deficiency to depression. So now, more research is definitely needed in this area. It's not known that people who experience depression and other mood disorders like anxiety are that way because they have low levels of vitamin D, meaning that the vitamin D deficiency is causing these things directly, or if people who are depressed also just happen to have low levels of vitamin D, probably a little bit of both there. So it'll definitely be interesting to see where that research goes in the coming areas. So how much vitamin D is optimal for health? So the RDA, is for vitamin D depends on the age, gender, skin color. That being said, the recommendations are fairly low in my opinion. So for example, a man my age, the RDA is just 15 micrograms, which compared to the vitamin D supplement I take during the winter is nothing. The one I take actually is 125 micrograms or 5,000 IUs. So during the winter months, I take 5,000 IU of vitamin D a day. But I actually found a study where they dosed people with up to between 5,000 all the way upwards of 50,000 IUs of vitamin D daily for 12 months. So it's not just, a 6-week trial, it's a whole year, which is a lot. And they saw great improvements in vitamin D blood levels. There were no cases of hypercalcemia, which is basically, I said earlier, vitamin D helps calcium reabsorption. If there's too much of that, there can be calcium deposits that build up within your body, and that's bad news bears. So no hypercalcemia, even after 16 months, and there were no cases of vitamin D toxicity according to their blood levels. Now these patients also had improved health conditions such as their psoriasis, which affects your skin. Now I would say a lot of these people seem to be very deficient in vitamin D to begin with, so you definitely have to take that into consideration. But needless to say, I don't think you need to be too concerned with taking those higher, quote unquote, higher levels of vitamin D, because most supplements are going to have at least, 2,000 IUs per serving, if not like 5 like mine. So how do we get vitamin D? Let's get into some of the sources. So most people probably know the sun is actually the best source of vitamin D. So it comes from the sun, UVB rays particularly. So we actually synthesize vitamin D in our skin. So we actually can make it in our skin, but we need UVB rays to do it. So once the sun hits our skin, then we can start making it all in there. And once we get enough to produce it, it's stored in fat because it's a fat soluble vitamin. So this is why it's a problem if you're overweight or obese, you have excessive amounts of body fat. You're not going to be as good at synthesizing vitamin D because it's going to get stored. You'll be able to make it, but it's going to get stored in that fat and not be able to get into your bloodstream quite as efficiently. So once it's stored there, it's released into the bloodstream. And here's an interesting fact. So obviously it's a vitamin, but it's also a hormone. So it actually gets transformed into a hormone within your body. And here's the main point. It actually regulates over 1,000 genes within our body. That's pretty crazy. That's actually about 5% of the whole human genome, which is another reason why it's super crucial to health. So the biggest issues with getting enough sunlight are geography, as I stated earlier, and skin pigmentation. So basically, the darker complected you are, the less efficient your body is at synthesizing vitamin D from the sun. And it makes sense if you think about it. People with darker complexions probably developed that because they grew up in areas closer to the equator and they needed that darker skin so they could be out in the sun for prolonged periods of time without getting sunburn. And they didn't really need to be super efficient at absorbing that vitamin D because the sun was always plentiful. Whereas someone like me, I'm super pale, probably have ancestry in like Northern Europe or something like that, where it's often overcast, cloudy, especially during the winter. I needed to be super efficient at absorbing vitamin D because you didn't know when the next little bit of sunlight was going to be. But now, obviously, in modern times, people are free to move wherever, planes, all that good stuff. So people like me, I go somewhere down to the equator, say to vacation, I'm getting enough vitamin D, but I'm getting burned like a mofo. And then you have someone that's darker complected that wants to move, say, to the Midwest, and obviously they're not going to get burned, but they're going to be severely deficient in vitamin D if they don't either get it through their diet or supplement it. So it's definitely interesting how that plays a part. And another thing that can affect that is wearing sunblock. I know a lot of people are scared that sun causes cancer, and definitely if you just keep getting sunburned and sunburned over and over, that's definitely not good for you. But if you can try to get outside for at least 10, 20 minutes a day without sunblock on a sunny day, I don't think you're going to get burned, and it's going to really help you get more vitamin D. Another thing that can affect vitamin D absorption is if you live in a big city where there's a lot of tall buildings, that can kind of impede the sun's view. So try to get in more of like an open area, get out in nature. And then actually air pollution. So bigger cities are probably going to have more air pollution from all the cars and stuff like that. That can also affect vitamin D synthesization. So what can you do if you can't get enough sunlight? So sunlight should be your go-to, but the next one is diet. So sunlight's the best source, but there are foods that are rich in vitamin D. So your top sources are going to be like salmon and other fatty fish. I'll put a picture up here on the screen with like sources and serving sizes with the amounts and all that good stuff. So fatty fish like salmon, I think tuna was one of them. Mushrooms are actually a really good source because they actually soak up vitamin D when they're exposed to the sun when they grow. So the more, the amount in a mushroom can vary depending on how much sun it was exposed to during growth. Whole eggs are another good source, the yolks in particular. And then I think most milk, at least cow's milk, is usually fortified with vitamin D, so they just add vitamin D to the milk. So that's a little bit of a good source. There's not a ton of, food vitamin D sources, and especially if you're from the Midwest like me, people don't really eat, if salmon's the best source, people don't really eat seafood like that because you have to import it from either coast. It's a lot more expensive. People are a lot more likely just to eat beef or pork or chicken. So that's why I think supplementation is honestly a lot of people's best bet. So it's definitely the easiest way to get your vitamin D. You literally just pop a pill and there you go. But most vitamin D supplements, like I stated earlier, have more than enough to achieve optimal levels. Like I said, I take 5,000 IU during the winter months. And by the winter months, I mean from probably October, November to through February, maybe even into March. There's a picture I found. You can actually just look up like vitamin D sun map and it'll tell you all like the regions of the world and when there's enough sunlight to get adequate vitamin D. Basically what I've heard, I think it's about 35 or 40 degrees latitude. If you're north of that, between the months of like November through February, there's just not enough sun. So that encompasses basically the whole Midwest and upper US. So definitely something to take into consideration. And I mean, some people might say that's a little bit too high, 5,000 IUs. By all means, definitely not medical advice here, so ask your doctor if you're concerned. But I don't think people realize how much they lack this critical vitamin that helps our immune system. Touching on the immune system one more time, there's actually, when people were getting COVID, they were noticing that people that got it and were doing not as well on the recovery side were very deficient in vitamin D. Now, is that just a coincidence or is it a little bit of correlation? Probably a little bit of both. Definitely be interesting. I know some people were going crazy supplementing with like 10,000 IUs of vitamin D a day. So definitely be interesting to see where that goes in the future. It could definitely become a problem because if you have too much, like I said, get those calcium deposits, just bad news. So that's about all I got, guys. I hope you found this video helpful. As you see, I'm definitely a big fan of vitamin D. So try your best to get out in sunshine when you can. When you can't and the weather in your region doesn't allow for it, try to focus more on dietary intake. And if that doesn't work out, you can always get a supplement. Vitamin D supplements are super cheap. So give this video a like if you did enjoy it. Comment down below any other ideas you want me to do for the channel. Subscribe. Follow me on Instagram, French_fit40. Posting content daily on there. Fitness, nutrition, all that good stuff. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.